You can find me on Twitter at FantasyNav, and riding shotgun with me as always is my dude Mike Holland. Mike, how's it going tonight?
It's going good, man. Just got back from Dallas, witnessing that epic game between Texas and OU. Unfortunately, we didn't come out on a great end, but I had a pretty good run on DraftKings. So, yeah, feeling pretty good outside of the loss. It helps to take away the sting. So,
Man,
yeah, good times.
I feel like you might have hedged your emotions with the way that you built, which I definitely haven't been there before. I'm not I'm
Yes.
not hedging my rooting interest with my with my DFS builds ever
Got
whatsoever.
it's the only reason I'm not homeless, man.
So yeah, we're super pumped to be jumping into this week 5 slate. Mike talked about the Red River rivalry there, and I think that we're going to see a number of other games that have similar action throughout the week. For those of you that have listened before, you know the DFS Pawn Shop is going to run you through the showcase games where we are going to focus our time and our energy, really have the most of our exposure to. We're going to go pick through the sales rack. We're always going to take a look in the bargain bin, just make sure there's nothing that we shouldn't maybe take home out of what is usually some boo-boo items. And then always we're going to spend a little time on a few players and try to figure out if they are legit or counterfeit. So this will leave you with the core plays that you need to get the most bang for your buck in week 5. Mike, we actually have our first lighter slate of the season. We've got a 12 gamer because here in about 11 hours, the Jets and the Falcons are kicking off in foggy London town. But apart from that, anything stand out to you on the whole about this week 5 slate?
Yeah, for me, I think this slate's a little bit chalkier than what we've kind of seen. I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards really two or three games here from kind of what I've been looking at here. Um, I think it's going to be very important, as always, to kind of find the kind of value here in some of these other uglier games. There was some value last week in some of the uglier games, so just getting those one-offs is really going to help you, build that score that you need to compete. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the slate. I'm going to have some chalkier lineups and going to mix it up with. I'm going to take some shots at a couple of games that we'll talk about later. See if we can maybe go over on these and maybe create some separation from some of these chalkier games. So, yeah, that's what I got for you, man. You ready to get started?
Yeah, we can. With that, we can dive right into our showcase games. Again, this is where we are focusing the majority of our time and our attention, and this is going to be central to our builds for the week. As always, when you walk into the pawn shop, these are the items, the top ticket items that are sitting in that pretty backlit glass case, our showcase games. And right off the top, America's Game of the Week features one of the most important questions when you're at the pawn shop: legit or counterfeit? And specifically, we're talking about the entirety of the New York Giants receiving core, right? We saw the backup wide receivers fill in admirably last week. John Ross, 3 for 77 and a touchdown. Kadarius Toney finally got his shoes right. He hauled in 6 passes for 78 yards. He also had a rushing touchdown. Kenny Golladay obviously stepped into a bigger role, 6 receptions for 116 yards. So of those guys, Mike, which ones do you think are legit and which ones are counterfeit?
Well, my take on this whole thing is for legit. I'm going to go with Galladay. I think he's got the most upside in the GPP tournament. That's what I'm looking for. Um, the other guys, I mean, Tony, I know they're trying to work him in different places here. He's going to need that touchdown to get it done, though. So it's just not for me this week. John Ross, he's a nice piece for them. I think he's going to be super popular, and so that's why I'm not as high on this guy as a lot of people are. So for me, it's really just going to come down to Kenny Golladay uh, as far as the legit play here.
Yeah, I mean, it's always exciting to see these replacement level players pop in and flash when they get an opportunity. But from my point of view, they very much so are the second string options for a reason, right? So I think Galladay is definitely the smarter play. Tony, maybe over the course of the season, we see his role expand, kind of week over week. But here in week 5, I think you're really rolling the dice if you're firing up any Giants receiver not named Kenny Galladay. So right there with you on the reads for those three. Kind of zooming out a little bit to the whole game picture. This is the 425 Fox game. We're looking at a 52 game total. This line opened at 49.5, so it's actually one of the biggest increases of the week. I think we're probably going to see some chalk here. And despite that movement on the game total, the Cowboys have held steady at 7-point favorites. So that leaves them with an implied total at 29.5, with the G-men at 22.5. Mike, what are your other thoughts on this afternoon tilt between these NFC East rivals?
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of attacking the slate in a couple of different ways. I'm going to play some of these chalkier games. So this being one of the two that I think is going to be super popular. I am going to go right back to the well here. Dak Prescott, only 6,900. He's been one of the better quarterbacks this year. So I see no reason not to go back to it. I am looking to pair him with either CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper. They're both still reasonably priced at 6,200 and 6,100. So yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be a super popular stack either way you go. I think Zeke's a little interesting. 7K, that's going to keep a lot of people off, especially if they're trying to reduce maybe some workload with the nagging injury. I know he's good to go, but Pollard's always looming. And so whenever his ownership gets dragged down, I'm all for him, taking some stabs here on some of the larger field, because I feel like people are just not going to want to pay that price tag for him. So that's where I'm at with the Cowboys. Where are you at on this thing?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions that I have for you about these Cowboys, and they start with the receiving core, specifically looking at CeeDee Lamb, right? Like $6,200 for a player of his caliber just feels like it's too cheap. Obviously, he's coming off a couple of down weeks, so I guess the question that comes to mind is do you think that his cool streak kind of keeps his ownership lower than it should be, or do you think that maybe that decreased price tag boost how often he's rostered in week 5?
I think at this price tag, 6,200, I think you're going to have a lot of people that were burned, that don't like to go back to that same well. But you do have people like me that are just going to go right to it. I'm going to have more Lamb than I have Cooper. That's for sure. It's just kind of due for a breakout here. The kid's too talented. And, I mean, I don't actually mind playing both of them. If you think you want to run this thing back with Barkley and maybe like an Ingram, just getting like a full game stack, you can get creative with this game and try to be different. I think being different is playing Prescott with Lamb and Cooper. But if you're just picking one, I do like Lamb, and I'm just hoping that his ownership just kind of cools off like his game logs here recently.
Yeah, I know that Cooper's coming in a little nicked up, right? He was sort of limited in practice throughout the week. He carries a questionable designation for tomorrow afternoon's game. How much of a role is that playing in your decision to maybe favor Lamb a bit more than Cooper? Is injury a factor there, or you just think the young buck is due?
No, I just think the young buck is due. Like I said, I don't actually mind pairing them both together. If this game goes over, then there's a good chance that you're either going to need a Dak Cooper Lamb lineup or a Dak Zeke and Lamb or Cooper type lineup. So we saw that the other day. And yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where I'm at, just kind of mixing and matching. I'm not really playing tight end roulette. I don't want to play either guy. I know that both can have a solid game here or there, but it's just not really for me as far as I'm concerned with Jarwin and Schultz there.
Yeah, it certainly feels like Schultz is seeing opportunities, at least at a rate that's not going to be able to sustain. I think he's seeing like a 33% target share through the last 2 weeks or something like that. So obviously prone to come back to earth. I do really like your call on the Zeke side. I think the price tag is probably going to keep people away. But ultimately, I mean, this is a game script that at least theoretically should have the Cowboys up for a good portion of the latter half of that game. So to get what looks like prime Zeke for 7K at low single digit ownerships, I think is certainly something that's going to give you a lot of leverage on the field. Flipping over to the Giant side, I absolutely love Saquon Barkley this week. The biggest question mark for Barkley throughout the year has been, when are they going to ramp up his workload again? And he's there. He's seen over 80% of snaps. I think it was 88% last week, but over 80% in 3 straight. Despite the ramp up time for those first couple of games of the season, he's currently 3rd in the league in routes run. He's 4th in the league in route participation. He's 10th in the league in target share at his position. So he's very much so back at that point where he is far and away the most heavily involved player of arguably any running back, maybe putting Derrick Henry to the side. But the way that he's utilized there for the Giants, coupled with the Cowboys, who are allowing the most receptions per game, the 2nd most receiving yards per game to running back, I'm going to be way overweight on the field with regard to Saquon. Where did you land on him?
Yeah, I'm going to be overweight too. I mean, he's 7,300. Yeah, I'm going to have shares of him. I mean, he's not going to be priced at these low price points for long. So, I'm just going to keep going there. I'm not going to go like completely crazy with it. But yeah, I mean, he's got 30-point upside. So why would I not keep going to that well until his price really dictates me getting off of that? I think another interesting play in this game, and maybe I just keep doing this to myself, but 3,200, I like to punt tight end a lot. Evan Ingram, 6 targets last game. I know the guy he just doesn't seem like he's good at football anymore, but at some point he's going to catch a touchdown. He's going to have a decent game. So, I'm going to go ahead and roster him on some lineups here because I don't like the tight end position. So you're going to have to pick and choose here, kind of what you go with.
Yeah, we're slated to talk about it a little bit more as we get further into some of the other games. But ultimately, I think that this is a week where punting tight end makes a ton of sense. And to punt at a position, there's a lot to be said for targeting a punt play in what stands to be the highest scoring game on the slate. So definitely we'll have some Ingram shares out there. We've actually got a couple of questions and comment that popped in. So Jeff's showing us some love. He's here watching from work. Hopefully no one else at work knows that you're watching at work. But he does have a question about this game. He wants to know if you think that Diggs ends up shadowing Golladay, and just generally how at least better than expected Cowboys defense might take Golladay out of the mix.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of Diggs on Golladay. So, but the price point for me and the game flow and what I think is going to happen in this game is really just going to dictate how I'm going to play Golladay, and that's kind of smashing the lock button on him on a lot of my lineups. I feel that confident. It feels like he's Danny Dimes' favorite target right now. So I don't know. I mean, I think this game's going over. I've seen the Cowboys offense. The Giants are going to have to score with them. So I think even though Diggs is going to be shadowing Golladay, I still think he gets there.
Yeah, and we likely won't see kind of the traditional shadow coverage that we think of when that term is invoked. But even if the majority of Galladay's time is with Diggs on him, he's certainly the most capable defender in that Cowboys secondary. But he's sort of slightly above average in terms of a matchup rating in a cornerback wide receiver matchup sort of sense. So even if Golladay sees more Diggs than anyone else, he hasn't quite gotten to that lockdown status to where I'm changing my point of view on him given this particular matchup.
Completely agree. I'm going to the well, and we'll see what happens. If it's empty, it's empty.
Let's go. So back to the well with another game here in our showcase. We have Green Bay heading to Cincinnati. It is a 1:00 game with a 51-point total. This one opened at 48.5, so it's actually matched with the last game that we talked about in terms of the biggest lift. It walked up another 2.5 points. Green Bay opened as 3-point favorites, settled in at -2. So that leaves the Packers with a 26.5 point implied total, and Cincinnati at 24.5. So at least, looking at the betting markets, I'm more than happy to lay the points with Green Bay here. I was a little surprised to see this much line movement, at least on the game total. But I guess with that in mind, Mike, what do you make? How do you make sense of that much movement in the betting markets?
Yeah, I think people like Green Bay right now. It looks like after that first week, they've kind of been on a roll here, and I think this is a pretty poor matchup for Cincinnati. So I think this game's going to be pretty popular when it comes down to the stack of like Rodgers and some of these receivers. I know people love to play Adams. I'm going to have a lot of Rodgers Adams stacks here, but I actually also like the other side of it, and also like being a little different here. So I mean, Jones is okay at 7,900. Man, the Cobb at 4,000. He's just interesting. Kind of the way you saw. I'm not game log watching, but it kind of feels like it. And we just talked about that with the last game. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers knows who his guys are, who to get the ball to. I think Cobb throughout the year was going to be more involved as he kind of got more acclimated to playing in the system. So for me, I'm going to have my shares of the Rodgers Adams stack and kind of mixing and matching.
Yeah, that makes sense. The thing that's tricky for me on that stack is just how expensive it is, right? Take this for what you will, being that it's a 4-week sample size, but Cincinnati is now inside the top 5 at DVOA. They've also had a mostly favorable list of opponents in their wake, but they're certainly not the turnstile of Bengals teams of sort of recent memory. So to be that heavily invested in one stack in this game in particular with Rodgers and Adams, it's hard for me to pull the trigger on. And just in general, like I want exposure to this game. I actually feel like the Cincinnati side of this could potentially be the build that takes down one of these large field tournaments. But I'm not too keen on the game overall because I have a really hard time kind of figuring out which game plan they're going to take out there, right? If you look over the last 3 weeks, we've had an Aaron Jones game, we've had a Devonta Adams game. Last week was the Randall Cobbs game. It seems like this coaching staff really finds the matchup that they want to exploit, and they just keep going back to that well, right? So to get it right, if I'm stacking this game, I feel like I'm going to have more entries and more exposure than I would to really try to cover all the bases. I don't know if you're right there with me, Mike, or maybe I'm overthinking it and I just need to shut up and play Adams.
Man, if it's not going to be,
this is what I'm chewing on.
If it's not going to be popular, I mean, if the Rodgers Adams stacks aren't going to be popular, then I want that. Please, like I would love to wake up and be like, oh, you have 4% Rodgers and Adams. Like that sounds like a good deal to me, and I can just kind of kick back and relax the rest of the day. So it's an expensive stack, but I mean, those guys can get it going. I mean, you can easily see them put up 60 plus together. So I get it. It's expensive, but I do love the other side of it. And that's actually where I'm going in some of my winner take alls here. So here we go again, right? The old Joe Burrow. Right now, I don't know who I'm going to pick to go with him because it's kind of tough with the 3 guys that are there. My mind's telling me Jamar Chase, but
my body,
man. So it's going to come down to one of those rush decisions with 20 minutes to go and lock, and I'll probably talk myself out of Chase, and he'll have a big game. So.
Yeah, I think what to do with this Cincinnati receiving core is maybe one of the more interesting questions to explore on the slate, right? Like Jamar Chase has been absolutely incredible in this young season, right? Like there were all these damaging reports coming out of Cincinnati during training camp about how he was slow to learn the playbook. He couldn't get separation at this level. And then immediately we just saw the power of strong chemistry between quarterback and wide receiver. So, the return of T. Higgins is really what makes these waters particularly murky, right? So I guess the question that I have for you is if the return of Higgins is going to eat into Jamar Chase's volume enough to maybe make him a fade or at least to go underweight on him, or conversely, with all of the Chase hype, do you think Higgins comes in way under-owned and is maybe a spot where you can get some leverage?
I think with their pricing kind of being that 5 to 5.8 range for Boyd included in that, I think people are going to spin the wheel and just kind of land on the one that they want to go on. So I think they're all going to kind of be depressed as far as ownership. They're helping to spread it out. You just hope that the one you pick just kind of goes off with Burrow. And if you have that stack, I mean, you're going to be pretty far ahead of the field if you can pick the right receiver here. But also what's interesting, and like I said, tight end, it's just so frustrating this year. I feel like I could never get tight end right. But, CJ had that big game the other day, basically tore up the showdown slate. I guess I'll click his name too. So here we go, right? He might not catch a pass, but I'll roster him on a few of these.
Do it. We don't chase here at the DFS pawn shop. We saw his best performance of the year, and it's in the rearview mirror. The thing that I think is super funny about looking at the tight ends in this game, like CJ is coming off of like an otherworldly, like career high performance last time out against the Jaguars, and Robert Tonyan has looked like absolute doo-doo through 4 weeks of the season.
It's like CJ is
so it definitely feels like the people that make the pricing over at DK just kind of threw their hands up on what to do at tight end in this game. But yeah,
do anything with Mixon in this game?
I mean, I'm wholly staying away, right? Like all of the reporting, all of the indications leading through the week and through practices where he's doubtful, he's not likely to play, the team's preparing to be without him. And then all of a sudden he has Saturday practice in the dark of night and they're going to find a way to get him involved somehow. Like, kick rocks. I will waste my money somewhere else. If he gets in there and he goes nuts, like, I'm perfectly comfortable losing this week, knowing that I faded some type of role situation for Joe Mixon.
Oh man, it's gonna be on the Millie Maker lineup.
Right. Now that we said this, for anyone that's out there and watched us over the last few weeks, we're on a good streak of whoever we make the most fun of is whoever ends up on the Millie Maker lineup. So shout out anyone that took our jokes and fired up Cordell Patterson last week, right?
All the way to the bank. All the way to the bank. Anything else here, man, or you want to move on?
Yeah, we can keep it moving. The third of our showcase games is San Francisco heading to Arizona. It is another 425 game. Looking at a 48.5 game total. This one has actually gone the other direction. This is the biggest mover and the biggest faller of the week. It opened at 53.5. There's a lot of volatility out there in the market, depending on which book you play at. Some lines are still floating around 50. Some are closer to 52. Ultimately, once Trey Lance was named the starter, that's where we really saw this line start to move. And move in the Cardinals' favor. The Arizona is now picked up a point off of that movement. They're sitting at a 5.5 point favorite, leaving them at an even 27 implied total, with San Francisco sitting at 21.5. And yet again, here in the showcase, we need to take a closer look at something and determine if a player is legit or counterfeit. And this time, it's the starting quarterback for these 49ers. So in the second half of last week, Lance was pretty solid. He completed 9 out of 18 passes, 157 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had about 45 yards on the ground and converted a 2-point conversion. So, Mike, from your point of view, is is Trey Lance the real deal, or is he more of a Folex?
Oh man, do I have to play him? Like, I don't want to play him. For me, God, his rushing upside just makes me want to play him, but it's not for me this week. And as a whole in this game, I don't know if I want to go here this week. I feel like this could be an ugly game. So for me, I have to wait and see with Trey. It's just not for me this week.
Yeah, I think Trey Lance feels more like a cash game play this week, just given the price tag that he's carrying, right? Like he has the rushing upside that contribute to where you can get to 2.33, 2.5x a number of different ways. Overall, like I think he brings a boost to the offensive picture in San Francisco. So the line movement is a bit confusing to me. Looking at that second half of play, he really looked a lot like a rookie quarterback, right? Like he stared down his receivers. He felt pressure and bailed from the pocket, too quickly. The one of his 2 touchdowns was just an absolutely blown coverage pass to Deebo Samuel. So, I don't think he's going to come in and set the world on fire, but I do think it fundamentally changes what these Niners do on offense, right? We're going to see a lot more play action. We're going to see a lot more read option. Ultimately, from my point of view, it feels like the rushers in San Francisco, Trey Lance included, are probably going to see the biggest boost. So all of that really has me looking at Lance as more of that cash game play. On the other side of this ball, I mean, I would like to have a lot of Arizona, right? Like, it's one of the highest game totals on the week. They're a considerable favorite, so I tend to lean towards stacking that side of the game. But it's always really tricky to figure out who it's going to be in Arizona, right? Yet again, they're running more 4 wide than any other team in the league, and they're leveraging that off of what's proven to be a really effective ground game with Murray, as well as Edmonds, as well as Connor. So it feels like there's probably going to be just a couple of opportunities for those big scoring plays for the receivers, and trying to figure out which one is going to be super tricky, right? The question that I have for you is maybe looking at the best player on this, or at least the best receiver on this Arizona Cardinals team. DeAndre Hopkins is maybe going to land at like single digit ownership. Is that something that you maybe want to exploit by way of stacking, or is he more of like a one-off kind of piece that you're going to fit into your lineup?
Man, yeah, you want to play Murray, right? 8K. Murray feels like a little more of a cash game play to me. I don't know here. I think Arizona is going to have an easier time than what people think. I think this game does get a little ugly. So if you're into Murray and stacking him with someone, I'm just going to stack him with Hopkins. I don't really want to play roulette like I always say with the other guys. It's just not for me. If you stack him with Hopkins, that's 15-6. Not a lot of people are going to want to spend 15-6 on that stack. So you will get, at least I feel like they're not going to want to pay that for that stack. So I think you're going to get some decent ownership there. But for me, I just Kyler Murray, I guess you can play him naked too. Obviously, he hasn't really shown the crazy upside that he has rushing the ball. I don't know if that's going to come into play. So yeah, for me, I'm just not really doing much with this game, honestly. I don't know how the total gets there. I think it just goes under.
So right on cue, Jeff is back in here and is mimicking your statement that he's only really looking at Murray as a naked option. So maybe we kind of zoom out on the strategy piece, right? Like, for GPP builds, is there ever a point where you're super comfortable not stacking your quarterback?
Yeah, Lamar Jackson. That's about it for me. But yeah, I guess you can play Kyler naked here. It's just I always feel like if I click that, then I'd like mess around with the rest of my lineup, and then I end up just finding the quarterback that matches the best receiver that I have in it, and
I mean,
end up
that's kind of
saving
my
money.
point, right? Like
Yeah, like it just doesn't feel
that's
right.
why Kyler feels like more of a cash game play for me. Like even if it's it's advantageous pricing, it's a fantastic matchup, whatever it might be, I can just never really feel great about having my QB naked in a GPP build. So that's why I was looking to get your thoughts on if there's ever a time where you feel all right about it.
Yeah, because I mean, if he throws 2 touchdowns to Christian Kirk, then you're gonna wonder like why you didn't stack him with the receiver, and then you have to move on to next week, and you'll just keep stacking him as you go on.
Yeah, yeah, maybe if he gets there through the air, but it's Max Williams and one to Chase Edmonds or a couple of plays that you couldn't get to, then you can live with it. But I don't know if I'm pulling the trigger on that one, at least in week 5.
Yep, same here. Anything else from this game, or you want to move on?
Yeah, I think we are ready to move on, and we move on to the Minnesota Vikings. They are hosting the Detroit Lions. This is a 1:00 game. We are looking at a 49.5-point game total with Minnesota favored big. They're laying 10 points. So that gives them an implied total of 29.75 with the Detroit Lions at 19.75. So Minnesota, somewhat sneakingly, carries the highest implied total on the slate. And at least, looking back over the last 4 weeks, I think they're a better team than their record indicates. But, coming off of a pretty terrible performance against the Browns defense, but now walking into a pretty cake matchup. So what are your thoughts on the whole with this game, Mike?
Yeah, I like some pieces. I do like Swift if he's able to get it going here. Dalvin Cook's always in play. It feels like that questionable tag's just going to be on him for the rest of his career. I'm not really touching the quarterbacks here. I know they're cheap, especially Goff. He's like super cheap. It's kind of ridiculous if this game goes under. You might want to have some shares of him. But yeah, overall, I do like Justin Jefferson. I think he does. His price point is kind of getting to that point where I feel like people may not be as excited to roster him as he, kind of gets close to that 8K range. Yeah, other than that, I mean, I just feel like this game goes under too. And maybe I'm just getting cocky because of the GPP wins I had in Showdown college football today and NASCAR, and I'm just feeling myself right now. So maybe it's just I just don't want these games. Maybe I'm dumpster diving and too much right now, but that maybe my mind changes tomorrow. But yeah, I don't know. What are you doing with this thing?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because with Detroit constantly playing from behind, Jared Goff all of a sudden is one of the leaders in the league in pass attempts and in passing yards. But he's also Jared Goff, so not many of them are converting to touchdowns, or at least not at the rate that competent NFL quarterbacks would, given that volume. So I think that there are some pieces that you can try to figure out on the Detroit side, right? Is it going to be another Raymond week? Does Amon-Ra St. Brown all of a sudden fall back into favor? I mean, there are a lot of question marks in their receiving core, and it leads to their more consistent contributors. I think Swift is a fine play, right? Like he's going to get the majority of the early game work, and if and when the game script flips to where they're behind, he's still going to be involved as a receiver out of the backfield. So I think there's a pretty good floor there with Swift. And in terms of Hawkinson, I mean, I'm a huge Hawkinson fan, especially in dynasty formats, but I don't think I'm going to get there this week. Like we talked about it a little bit off the top, like with all of the big name tight ends being off of this slate, at least off of the main slate, this should just feels like a pay down week. And to have one of the most expensive tight ends in the spot where he has shown to bust in the last few weeks, I would rather cut my price tag at tight end in half and look for a couple of punts.
Yeah. Yeah, if I do, I don't know if I want to spend all the way up to Waller, but going against the Bears, but I don't mind the 5,500 tag on Hawkinson. He did get 8 targets last game. I mean, he is Goff's guy, so I don't want to play any of these Detroit Lions receivers for the rest of the year. Just seems like I'm just never going to pick the right one. I'm not mad at it, but man, I'm just punting tight end this week, and I just hope I hit bingo on one of these guys.
Yeah, I'm taking a similar line on the tight end. I think what's tricky about the Minnesota side of this game is really twofold, right? Like the price tag that Cook's carrying in, he's coming in at about $8,500 is just a bit too rich, given that it seems like some of that injury concern is still lingering, and now there's whispers of load management in this game where they figure to be up big. And kind of the same point to the receivers too, right? Like I don't think we're going to see the need for the Vikings to be throwing a ton. So you're kind of spinning the wheel as to which of the two, get maybe the only passing score on the game for Minnesota. So this is one where I think that there's going to be some decent scorers in this game, but
Right.
The path to getting there is like super bumpy, and I'm not trying to blow out a tire on this slate.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a game where you could see a winning lineup have a one-off from this game. The one guy that scores the 2 touchdowns, or a sweep where he has a touchdown and a lot of volume and a comeback on some of these small receptions that he gets that he turns into nice long runs there. So yeah, for me it's like, hey, I'm gonna mix and match some of these guys in there, but I'm not going crazy in this one. I actually like some games that are coming up here that I'm hoping that those go over and these stay under, then I'm ahead of the field.
Yeah, I mean, once again, Nerd Alert ran a very scientific poll through Twitter earlier today, and it looks like overwhelmingly the first 3 games that we ran through are going to carry the majority of the ownership. New York and Dallas walked away with a plurality at about 44%, and the Arizona and Green Bay games were each floating around right around 25%. So I do think that's where we're going to see the majority of the ownership land for tomorrow. So there certainly could be a couple of those one-off pieces here in this game that get there. But I'm right there with you. I'm looking at the sale rack games for a couple of spots that feel like they could be a lot of fun. So we'll head on down there, and it's maybe one of the best parts of any visit to the pawn shop, right? You got to stop by the sales rack, see what's there, right? Like the high ticket items in the showcase are always where you're gonna draw your attention, but ultimately, if you take a closer look at this sale rack, you can usually walk away with something that you're pretty happy with. And the first of our sale rack games are the Tennessee Titans heading to Jacksonville. This is a 1:00 game. I had to double check and make sure it wasn't the Thursday night game. We're looking at a 49-point total with the Titans laying 4.5. So that leaves Tennessee with 26.75 implied total, and the Jaguars at 22.25. Mike, the Titans are coming off of a pretty embarrassing overtime loss to the Jets, and Jacksonville is coming off of a lap dance in Columbus. Anything that you're looking at in particular in this matchup?
Yeah, unfortunately, right? Here we go. Hot takes, right? We'll start with the easiest take, though. I guess Derrick Henry, you just cash games, you just press the button and you move on. God, 9K, right? Like, is this going to drag his ownership down in GPP to where it's like I think it was 2 weeks ago, it was like 8,600, and I got him at 4% and ended up cashing a couple of really nice lineups. If you're telling me I'm going to get that exact same thing, I'm probably going to have a few more. But where I'm going in this game is going to be the Jacksonville side, and I don't like saying that, right? So probably what I'll end up doing is using some Lawrence here, especially with Chark being out now. I do like Chenault a lot, which really hurts to say, but I'll also have some Jones stacks there. I think it will be different to have a Henry run back with, the Lawrence and the Marvin Jones deal here, but I like AJ Brown. As you saw last week, it just seemed like Tannehill was just praying for these guys to come back. It just was so ugly. Now that he gets his number one guy back here, I think he's going to obviously get, double-digit targets here. And yeah, I want this game to go over because I'm going to have probably too much ownership in this game. But this is kind of one of my hot takes, and a game that I'm going to have some stacks and large field GPPs. And I don't even mind Robinson here in this game either. But if you go with the Robinson, you're probably going to have a weirder lineup on the other side because I don't really want to play him with Lawrence. So what are your thoughts on this thing?
Yeah, I'm right there with you in terms of how the lineup would look if you fire up Robinson. I think he's probably the most leverage that you can get out of this game. And at least over the last couple of weeks, like he's really stepped back into that James Robinson role of 2020, right? He's on the field a ton. He's still seeing plenty of third down work. He's seeing plenty of targets, right? Carlos Hyde was a myth after week one. So, I do think that there's a lot of opportunity to be had for Robinson, and this Tennessee defense is atrocious, right? Like we saw what the Jets did to them last week, right? So, there's no reason to think that this is going to be one of those blowout laugher games where the Jaguars have to abandon the run and Robinson's left, wanting more on the sideline. So I do like the Robinson play a bit. The fact that it makes your lineup a little weird, I think, brings a bit of leverage. Sticking with the Jacksonville side, because I love pain. Dan Arnold is probably one of those tight ends that I'm looking at.
We got to go to church.
Yeah, something. I need the Lord. You look at it, for me, it's a story I'm telling myself, but it's one I can buy into, right? Like finding a pass catching tight end was a priority for this front office. They went out and way overpaid for Dan Arnold, and 3 days later he was on the field for better than 50% of snaps, saw a couple of targets, hauled in a couple of passes, right? Like for a guy that's sitting around $2,500 on DraftKings, like his path to getting there is super, at least his floor to get there, I should say, is super low, and it's something that I'll probably throw a couple of darts, further on the Jacksonville side, like which receiver to pick is the question, right? Like to me, it feels like Visca's a bit more of a cash play, just given his price tag and the volume that he's going to haul in. It feels like Marv and his nose for the end zone, his involvement in the red zone for that matter, makes him a bit more of a GPP play. So that's probably how I'm going to ultimately attack this one. Are you going anywhere different in terms of how you're thinking about these Jacksonville receivers?
No, I'm just going to kind of mix and match on this thing. Kind of looking at it, though, I do probably want to play Marvin more just because I'm already getting weird in this game. Maybe just a little bit of peace of mind than going full crazy with a Henry Brown with a Lawrence Chenault Dan Arnold stack. So I'll see you guys.
He said Dan Arnold. I'll see you at church.
I'll see you. I'll see you in Jamaica once I enter this ridiculous lineup in the Millionaire Maker. But these are the types of things, man. Like, yeah, getting weird is in large field is the way to go, man. I mean, yeah, there's just so much intrigue in this game for me, and And maybe I'm looking too much at how Tennessee performed last week, but man, they just haven't really shined on defense at all this year. So it's like I'm just gonna go attack that until I see something different.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on the Marv call, and actually our guy Joe's right there with us too. And if for nothing else, the touchdown upside is super appealing in a game that should feature a lot of scoring, right? But also like the market responds to what happened most recently, right? Everyone saw that Thursday night football game, that island game where Laviska Shenault was just getting peppered with targets. So I would imagine that he's probably going to have close to double the ownership of old Marv. And to get someone who's got that level of involvement and that scoring upside at 5-6% ownership compared to Visca at 10 or 12, that's where I'll have more exposure for the Jaguars pass catchers.
Well, yeah, let's see what happens, right? Maybe we'll split the millie.
Yeah, let's go. So we'll stick in the state of Florida for our next game. We've got Tampa Bay hosting the Miami Dolphins. This is a 1:00 game. We're sitting at a 47.5 game total. Tampa Bay is favored by a huge 10.5 points, leaves them with 28.75 implied total. Miami all the way down at 18.75. Mike, where are you looking at with this one?
Here we go again, right? Glutton for punishment. Yeah, our guy here, Fournette, 5,200. Nice little matchup here. And I think the game script obviously fits. I mean, it checks all the boxes, right? So what could go wrong? Yeah, so I'm going to go with Fournette. You can never go wrong with Brady stacking with either Godwin or Evans. They're still very viable. It's not an expensive stack. It's not cheap. It's just kind of right in the middle. I don't know how many people are going to go to this. I like this game to go over, though. And as I've said before, people that play Tampa Bay, people that play Kansas City, I know it's Miami, but they just seem to play more aggressive. You saw, Jalen Hurts, kind of how he performed. When they play these teams that have high octane offenses, and that Brady's going to come out here and have a really, really good, strong performance after the whole New England thing. Miami's going to need to run with them to keep up. So this is a very stackable game if it goes over. As far as what I like on the Dolphins side, though, I'm not playing any any percent here. So no, don't give me that look. Definitely not going to that. But I do like Waddle. I think the price is nice here. I had some Gesicki shares. Last week I don't even think they targeted him until the fourth quarter, and he still ended up catching a touchdown there. So I don't mind that 4,200. Give me some of that. So I know that feels like you should probably pair that with Brissett, but God, it just doesn't feel right clicking that little plus sign there. That's kind of where I'm at right now. If this game goes over, I do want some shares on it.
Yeah, I'm going to be overweight on this game relative to the field.
Let's go.
And probably by a good margin.
Oh, okay.
I completely agree with you on the Fournette piece, right? Like, awesome cash play, but also, in a game that it sounds like we're both projecting to go over, is going to be involved enough to where he can bring that upside that you're looking for in tournament, and his price tag is just incredible, right? And this all comes against a Miami team that is an absolute turnstile against the run. They're giving up the most DraftKings points to the running back position. I think it's like 33 or 34 points. They were tied with the Seahawks coming into Thursday night, but at least through 4 games, they were number 1 overall, and it looks like Fournette has a stranglehold on the workload in this Tampa Bay backfield. And on the Miami side, I won't say that Brissett's going to win the Millie Maker, but he might win the Mini Max. Someone that's throwing 150 quarters out there is gonna gonna have a good day in the bank with a Brissett lineup. You heard it here first.
Oh gosh.
And the thing for me is really finding ways to get him stacked with Waddle and with Gesicki, right? The way that you beat this Tampa Bay defense is with the short intermediate routes over the middle, specifically the tight ends, right? Like you saw two tight ends score touchdowns last week in New England, right? One to Jonnu, one to Hunter Henry. Tampa Bay themselves offer the third most DK points to tight ends on the season, and Mike Gesicki is involved in this offense with Brissett. He's averaging 9 targets per game over his last two. One of those was a 12 target game, but he's gone 6, 12, 6, so he's heavily involved. To your point earlier, he wasn't targeted essentially until the fourth quarter last week, and still ended up as the tight end 5, right? So he's a guy that's heavily involved in the game plan. It seems like he's got a really good chemistry with Jacoby Brissett under center, and his role is one that is tailor-made to take advantage of the soft spot in this Tampa Bay defense. So I'm all over this game. The biggest question mark for me in terms of how I build the run backs are which of these Tampa Bay receivers to go with, right? I've sort of fallen into a point where anytime there's 3 receivers, I usually look for the cheapest one. Mike, is that the line that I should take, or is there maybe a matchup that I should emphasize for the Tampa Bay pass catchers?
And maybe burying the lead. Is Antonio Brown going to go nuts in this game? Like, oh god, a Brady Brown stack. I mean, it's kind of interesting. There's just a lot of ways to go in this game, and that's why I think I like it so much. Like, it's a lot of ways to go and a lot of ways to be different. For me, I just want to essentially get off of Fournette. I'm trying to talk myself off of him, but it just seems like a great play. And I think something that could be super interesting is stacking Brady, one of the receivers, and Fournette together, because for whatever reason, they like to throw the ball to Fournette, it seems like, more than what they should. And that right there is a little intriguing. I mean, you're looking at it. He's got, I think 19 targets already this season. Like, what are we doing here? So, yeah, it's really a good way to be different. I was really on it the other day when it was Dak and Zeke and with Cooper. And so, yeah, that's how you really, really differentiate your lineups here. So, yeah, I'm going to have a few of those. It's just picking that receiver that's just going to be the annoying part of this thing. So, I don't know. Do you have one that you like?
Yeah, I mean, my mind goes to AB, right? Like the chemistry that he has with Tom Brady is legit. And if nothing else, he fits the mold of being the cheapest of the 3 options, right? So, if and when I find myself really going overweight on this game, I'm probably going to want to go find some expensive players elsewhere. So, a couple $100 savings for a guy that is really in a groove with his quarterback is probably where I'll end up going. But with how many builds I'll have around it, I'll certainly have some Evans and some Godwin out there, but more AB than anything else in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, last quick thought on this, like, it's just such a salary saver if you put Brady with Fournette and AB and run it back with Waddle and Gesicki. Like, yeah, I think Gesicki can get there at 4,200. He can get there without scoring if he gets one of those double-digit target games, which kind of eliminates the pressure of finding that tight end. As long as Waller doesn't go nuts or like a Hawkinson doesn't go crazy, that could be viable. And then you can just spend up. You can go get Henry. You can go get Justin Jefferson. So yeah, man, I should just stop now before I have way too much of this game.
I'm right there with you. It's gonna be a fun one to build around, because we're either gonna have an awesome day and a fun sweat, or we're gonna have our Sundays back. We're gonna know real early that we made a bad choice, and we can go sit on a patio and drown our sorrows, right?
That's right. Let's move on before I start to talk myself off before that again.
We will move on, and we'll move on to the Cleveland Browns heading to SoFi Stadium to play the Chargers. It's a 4:05 game with a 47-point total. The LA Chargers are laying 2.5, so that leaves them with a 24.75 implied total, and the Browns with 22.25. Looking at this game overall, I mean, first and foremost, through back-to-back weeks and back-to-back performances, it looks like regression has broke in Justin Herbert's favor. We're seeing a lot of passing touchdowns on the Brown side. They are still looking to emphasize the run. We heard the injury news with Baker Mayfield on his non-throwing shoulder, so I expect them to really look to emphasize the ground game and try to control. Rather play the ball control sort of game script. But what are you looking for out of this matchup, Mike?
A big old red X on it. I just don't like anything. I don't know. I like this game to go under. Cleveland just likes to play in these like ugly games. I like to run the clock out. I don't want to sit here and pick between Chubb and Hunt and then wonder why I even picked it between them in the first place. Yeah, Baker at some point has to put up a nice game, right? But maybe someone else can win the $1 million. I'm just kind of over it. They're just a boring offense, man. I know he has OBJ back and his price is starting to come up. On the other side, yeah, Herbert has been playing well. Eckler's price is starting to creep up. 7,600. I know he gets some volume in the passing game, but I just like a lot of other spots way more than this game. And really, if I do one-offs here, I'm just looking at Keenan Allen, and that's about it for me, honestly, man. Try to talk me into some of this. Like, can you get me onto this game? Because I'm almost completely off of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I can. I mean, I can get these guys back into your player pool if that's your question. I don't think I'm gonna have you feeling super bullish about going overweight on any of these players because I'm kind of right there with you. On the Brown side, I mean, this is still one of the most prolific rushing offenses in the league, right? That line is still superb. They have arguably the best tandem of running backs, to carry the ball back there. And specifically in this matchup, the Chargers run a ton of too high safety, right? So they're really their base defensive front is one where they are at least trying to coax their opponents into running more. So if they maintain that strategy, I do think there's going to be some lanes for both of the rushers. Specifically for me, I'm looking more to the Chubb side than anything else, just given his ability to either shed a tackle or break someone's ankles in the open field and take one to the house. And specifically, I mean, he's projected to come in at like 3.5% ownership, right? So this game does have some scoring potential, and more often than not, the Chargers are lining up in a defensive front that is more favorable to the run. So it feels like it plays right into the Browns' hands, and to get that upside from Chubb at the low single digit ownership, I'll certainly have him rostered in kind of some standalone spots. On the other side, I mean, the other thing that I would really bring to mind is the Austin Eckler play, and specifically more from a cash point of view. There just isn't a game script that doesn't set up for heavy Austin Eckler involvement. So depending on where my salary sits as I look for that kind of last guy in, I don't hate finding a reason to get Eckler in a game where no matter how the cookie crumbles, he should still see volume, right? To your point, I think everyone's going to be a little bit under-owned relative to what we see in a normal week. So I'll pick and choose some spots to get exposure to it as like kind of a last guy in.
Yeah, I think it's outside of Allen. I'm just going to keep the X on this game.
Man, I didn't do a good enough job swaying you over. So instead of bemoaning that, we will move on to Philadelphia and Carolina. We are looking at a 1:00 game here. The total for this one is currently sitting at 46. The Panthers are, as of right now, a 3-point favorite. They opened at 4.5 points. So that leaves them at a 24.5 implied total, with the Philadelphia Eagles sitting at 21.5 themselves. Ultimately, on kind of the broader football note, really surprised to see Gilmore end up there in Carolina after being released in New England. All reporting and indications are that he's going to need a few weeks before he's on the field. So I don't think it stands to help them much this week. And we saw the once touted Carolina defense just get completely exposed by the Cowboys last week. So I do think this one sets up to maybe shoot out, right? The Eagles have been a turnstile themselves. They're certainly able to stay in the game and put points up. So could be some scoring here, at least from my point of view. Mike, what are you looking for in this matchup?
I don't know, not much. I feel like after my the two previous games, these next two just kind of been downers. I guess DJ Moore is in play because it just seems like this dude's all he's going to do is score touchdowns this year. So yeah, I'll have some more. But other than that, man, Miles Sanders on the Philadelphia side is so frustrating. This whole Gainwell and time, the whole splitting of the carries here, it's just not for me. I don't want anything to do with Philly really this week. Hurts, I know he's more of a cash play for me this week. I don't really see the big upside. I was really on him last week when they had to throw up points against the Chiefs, but I'm not going to jump on at 7K. And then old Sammy D, 6,600 now. What a time to be alive, right? I'm either going to spin down there or I'm going to go up. So not for me there either. There's just not a lot I like in this game outside of Moore. What about you?
Sammy D, the league leader in rushing touchdowns, is what you meant to say. And we fully expect him to continue his 2 rushing touchdown per game clip, right? Like that's a real thing, isn't it? Yeah, I'm fully out on Sam Darnold. If anyone isn't picking up my sarcasm, I think it's important to be clear about these serious things. Do not play Sam Darnold this week. More still seeing volume, right? To me, this sort of feels like one of those games where you have to pick your spots, and I think that there are a couple arguments that can be made for this being one of them. I'm not really there myself, but I wouldn't be shocked to see a big number put up on the board from what looked to be 2 subpar defenses. On the Philly side, I was using it as a counter argument for Jalen Hurts last week, but the beneficiary of his one read and bail approach has always been this season Devonta Smith. So if you're looking for someone who's got a lot of volume floor, who can certainly has the burst and the skill set to break one, I think there's an argument to be made for Devonta Smith. If you really want to get weird, of this game, Moore is probably going to carry some of the highest ownership, but out of nowhere, Robbie Anderson started getting some looks last week. He only hauled in 5 for 46, but he got 11 targets last week. So right back to that kind of 50-50 split, and was being utilized and looked at down the field once more. So if you're in one of these giant kind of 150 max settings, and you're looking for a guy that is likely to be in a high scoring game and likely to be 1 or 1.5% owned with some pretty serious touchdown upside, I think Anderson fits that bill. The only question that I kind of had, for at least looking for your point of view, is what are you making of Chuba Hubbard? It looks like McCaffrey is back in the doubtful direction. Do you think that against a Philly team that has just been annihilated on the ground, there's an argument to be made for Hubbard?
No. 6K? No.
Hard pass.
Hard pass. Yeah, Yeah, we kind of talked about it last week. It's just like, he's just not great in the passing game, and I don't know. To me, it's just like there's just other plays around that price point. I'd rather drop down to Fournette. He's just not really in my player pools. This is not for me this week. Are you going to have any shares of him?
I might have a couple. The price tag makes it hard, but I do think that there are a number of paths to him really paying off. So I'll have him in the pool. I'll probably be a bit underweight, but yeah, I get the sneaking suspicion that he's going to find his way into the box a couple of times, catch a couple of passes, and make me eat my words.
That Darnold vulture on the 5-yard line.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Darnold's going to be on the millie now. When he goes for 3 rushing touchdowns, we can go ahead and review the tape.
Yeah, we'll just close up shop if and when that happens. Speaking of closing up shop, we are rounding out our evening here in the DFS pawn shop, and that is with, as always, a trip to the bargain bin. You got to make it a point to stop by there and see what they have. Overwhelmingly, it's not going to be stuff that you're going to be happy with. You're going to be happy spending your money elsewhere in the DFS pawn shop, but as time has shown us, there's always at least some value in taking a look down there and seeing if you can maybe piece together a leverage play or some salary relief. And the first game in our bargain bin is actually looking at one of our favorite questions, the DFS pawn shop, legit or counterfeit. And it is our guy, Darnell Mooney. Since Justin Fields has taken over, it seems like Mooney has really stepped into the primary receiver role. Mike, do you think now that it is officially Justin Fields season that Darnell Mooney is legit or counterfeit?
No, I think Mooney's legit. I liked him last year. He's got a lot of upside to him. His price is now starting to kind of reflect that. I know he just had the nice game against Detroit. But yeah, I think as Fields continues to grow into the role, I think Mooney becomes more viable, and I also think Robinson becomes more viable. I mean, we saw what Fields did at Ohio State. I don't think it was a fluke. So that first game, I really wish I'd played him last week. I did want to have some shares of him. I know he wasn't great, but he's just showing signs that eventually I feel like he's going to pop a game where he rushes for one, maybe throws a couple. I don't know if it's here, but I think it's eventually going to come. I want to be on it when it does happen. So yeah, 5,200. I mean, it's just so tough because you got these guys that are down here, right? The 5,200, 5,300, these Goffs and these Fields, and they're more than capable of putting up. I know we haven't seen Fields do it yet, but he's more than capable of putting up a 20-point game. So I'm just going to kind of take a wait and see approach here to most of this game. Honestly, there's not a lot appealing here. I mean, Robinson 5,500. He's way more talented than that price tag. But will he get there? I just don't know. I'm not going to spend up for Waller in this matchup. It's just not for me. And then the running back situation. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of pieces I like in this game.
Yeah, on the Mooney side, I love this kid's talent. I was out there sticking my neck out saying that last week he would have the game that Hollywood was supposed to have the week before, but without the drops. And he got pretty close to it, right? He certainly didn't score 3 touchdowns. The thing that I think is most concerning about his prospects is our guy Justin Fields completed 11 passes last week in a winning effort. So I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this Matt Nagy staff to correctly utilize a player of Justin Fields' skill set. So I think we're going to see a lot of like 11 and 15 and 14 pass completion days out of Fields. And obviously that's really going to hinder these receiving options. But if and when they can finally kind of get it figured out, I do think Fields certainly helps the offense overall. Moving on to our next game here in the bargain bin, we have the New Orleans Saints heading to Washington to face the football team. We are at a 43.5 game total, with the Saints favored by 2.5. So leaves them at an even 23 implied line, with the Washington football team at 20.5. Mike, anybody that you're looking at here in this tilt?
Yeah. Curtis Samuel. Oh man, just right down here in the dumpster, right? 3K. So yes, give me some Curtis Samuel. I don't know how much yet, but every time I click his name and I see my average salary just jump up, I might have more than I want. Just an interesting play. We'll see what kind of happens with it. He's gotten some targets here, and there's some injury issues there with Brown being out. So yeah, I think I'm going to go there. Someone that's really interesting to me is going to be McLaurin, just with the way that your boy here is just, man, it's like he doesn't see the rest of the field, just sees this guy. So yeah, I mean, I like a little bit of it. We'll see. This is a tough game for me, honestly, because I feel like it's gonna be an ugly game in this one. So it doesn't really put me on the Kamara as much here. And I just don't think Kamara is the same right now without the old breezy with him. So yeah, I don't know. You got anything in this one that you want to kind of highlight?
I think in this game, there is going to be a player that is the chalkiest play at their position, and that is the Washington football team defense at $2,300, hosting Jameis Winston, who has shown plenty of old Jameis Winston. This defense has disappointed. There's no bones about it, but I do think that they still have a lot of what we saw last year in them, and to get them as the third least expensive option at defense, I wouldn't be surprised if they are well into the double digits ownership. So this is one of those spots where defense in the DFS game, you're looking for those turnovers, and it could certainly happen here. And if it ends up being chalk and busts, I am out barely $2,000. So I'll have a lot of the WFT defense in my builds tomorrow, as I'm projecting many will.
What are your thoughts on Samuel? You got any hot takes on it?
No, nothing too spicy.
He's going to be popular, no? I mean, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, right? Like, following the points per dollar mechanism, I mean, he should be popular, right? I don't think a whole lot of people in kind of the betting public are going to go out of their way to look for tertiary options in this Washington football team offense. To your point on Taylor Heinecke, part of the reason why he couldn't break a roster before this year was he can't get through his progressions in the time that the NFL level allows him. So I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of secondary looks going Curtis Samuel's way, but at 3K, right? I mean, he's mid-priced. To me, it feels like most of the people that are using tools and that are making point per dollar valuations on their lineup are going to find a way to get Samuel in, but I don't think he's going to be crazy high owned, right? Somewhere in like the kind of 8 to 10 range makes sense. But certainly a big question mark heading into tomorrow.
So if you just go ahead and throw in Ricky Seals-Jones and Washington's defense and Curtis Samuel, you can pretty much pay for everyone else. Oh, God.
You're paying in other ways, though. You might not be paying in salary, but you're paying in other ways.
Yes, by your floor, you are paying for a really low floor.
Yeah. And speaking of low floors, our next game, we have the Denver Broncos heading to Pittsburgh to face off against the armless fighting Ben Roethlisbergers. We're looking at a 39-point game total. The Broncos themselves opened as an underdog, but they are now getting a point, as it looks like Teddy Two Gloves is going to be starting this week. So that leaves them with a 20-point implied total, and the Steelers at 19 points. I think there's an argument that can be made to play either defense from these teams. But apart from that, what are you looking at in this matchup?
Yeah, just give me some Broncos D against the noodle arm. And I'll take some shares of Najee, right? I mean, geez, they're gonna wear this guy out in year one. Like
They have
yeah,
to. They literally have no choice.
Oh man, like I bet he's regretting getting drafted to the Steelers now. But they should just be so much better, man. I mean, look at the receiving core. Like, it's just frustrating watching the Steelers play football right now. Yeah, so for me, gonna have some Broncos D's, some Najee, just because Deontay Johnson just seems to house one every time. I don't know if I can get there, but yeah, that's really all I'm looking at. I'm not even looking at anything on the Denver side, to be honest with you. I'm just, this total's ugly.
Yeah, it's gonna be a gross game. There's no two ways about it. You know, in terms of Deontay Johnson, I think he's a fine cash play. Like he's going to see the volume, right? You said that it's ugly to watch this Steelers offense. I'd say it's painful to watch. Like literally, it sounds like I feel like I can hear like the creaking hinges of an old house anytime that Ben Roethlisberger drops back. But whenever he drops back, he takes 2.5 steps and in barely 2 seconds exclusively throws the ball to Deontay Johnson. Even if he's not open, even if he doesn't have a good window, he just continues to shot put this thing his way. So that volume, makes him an okay play in cash. Najee Harris is going to get run into the ground. So, I mean, if you're chasing that, that high floor play, Pittsburgh seems to be willing to offer it to you. I think more than anything, it's just hilarious that we're at a point where now in 2021, Dwayne Haskins is the savior for a football team in the National Football League. I think that it will hinder the volume of guys like Harris and Deontay Johnson, but I have to anticipate that they are going to fold up shop and get Ben Roethlisberger out of there because he is a detriment to everything the Steelers stand for, and he is now impacting the growth and development of some of these young skill players they've put around him.
Yeah, no, man, I'd be surprised this total hits. That's sad, like really sad. But I think we got one more on docket, right? Your team.
Speaking of sad, let's talk about these Texans. The New England Patriots are heading to Houston to NRG Stadium to face off against the Houston Texans. We are looking at another 39-point total where the Patriots opened as 9-point favorites, but have now given back a half point. They're sitting at 8.5 points. So that leaves them with an implied total of 24.25, and the Texans with a whopping 15.25. Mike, how much over the field are you going on this Texans Patriots game?
Oh man, God, yeah. I guess I'll have some Harris, right? It feels dirty. Yeah, that's. Jeez, Patriots defense is almost 5K this week. Like, what are we doing here?
Fade.
Oh gosh, yeah. Just let's just wrap this thing up. Why don't we?
I've actually got a question for you. So
Here we go.
Yelling here in the background. Anyone who's thinking about spending $5,000 on a defense needs to immediately hit the withdrawal button on their DraftKings account and go put your money elsewhere. You have to fade this $5,000 defense. I don't care that they're going up against Davis Mills and his 3-foot-long neck. Do not play a $5,000 defense on any slate ever.
So you don't
the question
like the
that I had for you.
Okay. So I got a question for you after this as we close up. Go ahead.
It's a fantastic matchup. But the question that I have for you is that it looks like we saw Brandon Cooks finally be matchup / volume proof. He is the only receiver that caught a pass for the Texans last week. but he certainly wasn't seeing the volume of targets that a 40-0 blowout might imply. Do you think we see more of the 5 for 47 Cooks of last week? Or do you think that the fighting Davis Mills are able to get a few more passes his way to a point where maybe you can get weird and find a spot for Cooks at his current price tag?
I might just need to hit the withdrawal button if this is where I'm going. I
True.
don't know, man. It's not me. Like,
Pull the ripcord.
This is not for me. What I want to know is the defensive coordinator for the Patriots. If we're gonna go ahead and get that look when when Davis Mills throws that pick.
Stevie Belichick. Man, if Steven Belichick,
I wish I could roster. I wish I could roster him in the spot this week.
If he has to do whatever he allegedly did last week to get up for this Texans game, somebody needs to get this man help. I mean, he's already out there looking a mess. He's flicking his tongue like a cobra. If he's put on a performance like that against the Texans in Week 5, we need to stage an intervention there.
That's the only reason they're almost 5K. It's not Davis Mills.
Yeah. Over under 5 camera shots of him flicking the air like a snake in that early CBS window.
Smash the over.
Smash it. And on that note, we are going to close up shop here at the DFS Pawn Shop. Again, my name is Eric. You can find me on the Twitter machine at FantasyNav. Mike, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you and send us out?
Yeah, you can find me at MCHolland34 on Twitter. I am also a contributor to at Bacon and Egg Show, where we talk about all things Texas sports. We will not be talking about the loss today or the Aggie win because that's just not something we like to do. So, but yeah, for my boy here, Eric Romoff, we hope you guys win it all, or maybe come in second to one of us. And yeah, let's have a good week.
Let's go.